It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome back to another Real Estate Podcast, your largest real estate podcast library in Australia, as we talk your property information from Parramatta to Alexander Heights and every city in between. And you can stream us right now, multiple platforms, including Amazon and iHeartRadio. Another Saturday has turned up, March the 29th, and Sydney's high-end housing market is feeling the pressure, with sellers in affluent suburbs slashing prices by up to 13% as properties linger on the market. Domain reported that areas like Mossman, Manly and Chatswood have seen deeper discounts, while more affordable suburbs like Canterbury and Parramatta are adjusting by up to 7%. So that's pretty interesting. At the moment, it looks like affordability concerns are still top of mind for people, and the Sydney property market is shifting and adjusting accordingly. And that does lead me on to the housing supply, which does remain a persistent challenge right across Australia at the moment. And this week's budget and budget reply have placed it front and centre. With an election on the horizon, we're going to take a little bit of a dive into the state of play in the housing market and explore alternative solutions. And because it is a Saturday once again, joining us with his insights is Anthony Landau, the mortgage broker and managing director at Equilibria Finance. Anthony, first off, the current government commitment of building 1.2 million houses in 5 years is a massive number to try and achieve. Nothing wrong, of course, with bold initiatives when it comes to housing, but we also, I guess, need to keep the aspirational number in check and be attaining the metrics to do all of this. Where are the numbers that you're looking currently for seeing this sort of turn into a reality?
Yeah, good morning. Great to be here. And with the election now announced for the 3rd of May, it's really timely to be looking into all of this. One of the key areas for both parties is obviously the housing market, the chronic shortage and affordability. The government announced as of 1st of July 2024 for the 5-year period to 2029 that it would construct 1.2 million new houses. That breaks down to 60,000 newly constructed houses a quarter. Right now, we're tracking at about 44,000 a quarter. So we're 15,000 houses down on target. Labour shortages, construction costs on the one hand are impacting that, and the incredibly high migration numbers as well have impacted the demand side, making those numbers even starker in terms of the shortfall in that target.
Yeah, and politics, we know, are just a fact of life when it comes to real estate. Unfortunately, politics, it can slow down the whole process of getting more housing stock into the market. Words are great, aren't they, for politicians, because of this little thing called policy. Then you have the committees, and so it goes on and on, much to the frustration within the private sector, it has to be said. Both political parties committed this week to housing supply initiatives. So what government measures were announced? Can you just run through that for us this morning?
Yeah, look, I think it's important to start looking at what both parties are proposing. But back to your point, the Albanese government, for example, previously announced a $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund to put about $500 million into 20,000 new social homes and 10,000 affordable homes. Not one of those has been built. That's to your point around the regulation and a policy announcement. But who's to say where that'll land? But yeah, in terms of where they've both announced their policies, there's two issues they're trying to address in simple terms. There's the supply side. How can we build more houses? And there's demand side. How can we help buyers get into the market? So in terms of the incumbent or the Labor government in their budget announcements earlier this week, They're going to expand their shared equity program to try and assist another 40,000 home buyers, new home buyers into the market, where they essentially, it's their Help to Buy scheme, they essentially take a share in the house to assist first home buyers with lower deposits and smaller mortgages. They're still continuing their Housing Australia Future Fund that I touched on before in terms of trying to deliver 20,000 new social and 10,000 new affordable homes. It's still got in place its 1.2 million target to build those homes over the 5-year period. We're obviously 1 year into that. They've also got a $32 billion Homes for Australia election plan, essentially to soften home lending rules for Australians with university debts. This will change how they're assessed, where that university debt won't be part of the assessment, which will enable a first home buyer to borrow more. And finally, they're looking at foreign investors being banned from buying established properties for a 12-month period from April 1st until March 31, 2027, around 2 years, I should say. They're looking at some initiatives both to help with build as well as on the demand side to maybe help some home buyers into the market.
Yeah, and just talking about that university debt, I mean, how significant is that for first home buyers if that all sort of comes to fruition? Are you getting many questions asked around that piece of policy?
It's very significant. If someone's been at university for 4 or 5 years, they might have a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 HECS or HELP debt. We have to factor that into the serviceability analysis essentially as a liability to be repaid. It's often captured on pay slips as a repayment that's taken from their tax. So if that is removed or treated in a different way, it'll assist home buyers in terms of how much they can borrow. Of course, that HECS debt still has to be paid off. However, it will assist in terms of, serviceability and capacity in terms of how much they can borrow.
Yeah, that's a really big one. Big piece of the pie, definitely for first home buyers. We are talking to Anthony Landau on our Saturday morning with Mortgage Talk. We'll come back and talk more after this.
From the emotion of property, the economic inflation, managing your expectations, lack of stock, price growth, construction appetite, days on the market. Stay informed with us and know your property.
And right now, let's go to Queensland and catch up with somebody we were talking to a few weeks ago. Jackie McKeering is there, and she's in this spot of Sandgate. She's got a little bit of a property tip for us this morning. And good morning to you, Jackie. What have you got for us?
Well, today my number one tip is for buyers. I would not be waiting for any external factors like discounts, whether it's a rate drop or government incentives to buy first homes. I feel like they just inflate the market, that promise those first home buyers grants and in effect push those house prices up for them.
Explore new property destinations where you could live with exclusive interviews covering real estate news and market insights.
And it is a Real Estate Saturday. The weekend is here. You might be having breakfast as you're listening to the podcast this morning. And we talk, Anthony, about the process being slow when it comes to the political landscape. If you are in opposition, the political cycle, now that can seem to take forever if you have some new initiatives around housing that you would like to bring to the Australian public. And with that said, what is the current opposition's aims to assist our housing shortfall?
Yeah, the opposition leader obviously made some announcements quite broadly earlier in the week around cost of living measures, energy policy. Housing, of course, was part of that and a reasonably large part of that. Firstly, a coalition government would scrap the Housing Australia Future Fund, which actually hasn't delivered anything anyway. They'd similarly place a 2-year ban on foreign investors buying existing Australian homes. I think that's important in terms of it frees up stock for Australians trying to get in the market. Decreasing the demand side will ultimately help lower prices, enable more Australians to get into homes. They've also got some initiatives around us helping first home buyers and older women to use superannuation towards a home deposit up to about $50,000. One of the big challenges getting in the market is the sheer size of the deposit you need. So they'll enable that up to $50,000. And also looking through infrastructure funding, and there wasn't a lot of detail around this. There'll be more to come, I'm assuming. But on the supply side, looking at unlocking up to 500,000 new homes through some infrastructure funding, about 100,000 homes a year over the next 5 years. So there's some of the initiatives the Coalition has announced. I think we'll get a bit more meat on the bone around them in time. They've been talking about the superannuation savings towards a home deposit for a while, and that's one of the policies they're going to follow through, which should help some first home buyers. Immigration ban's pretty similar to what the Labor Party's offering too.
Yeah, it's a big talk, and there's a lot of talking points from each political party. They don't, of course, all agree, nor should they. And often it's about finding new formulas to political parties, and the public, they can be patient, fair to say, up to a point, and want to know realistically if any of these options will solve these supply issues, or are they just more announcements and band-aids without long-term strategies? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think it's a little bit of both, to be frank. I think probably the other thing that the Coalition's doing is talking about lowering immigration numbers by 25%. I think that'll also assist in terms of the sheer volume, in terms of the supply we need, and also the demand coming in for both rentals and buyers. Longer term, Australia's been heading towards this chronic supply issue for many, many years. It's not a sudden thing that we're confronting. Affordability's becoming harder for buyers. On the supply side, the construction and the sheer size of the developments we need to actually house Australians is getting harder and harder to capture. So I think the governments, if we look over the years, there's a lot more focus now on the governments around housing affordability, around the supply side. It's much more of an election issue and a government issue than it may have been in the past. We're leading into election. I suppose we're talking a little bit of politics this morning. I think as well, people are going to be looking at more broadly at some of the cost of living measures, because a lot of households, whether they're looking at getting in the market, saving for a deposit, managing more mortgage repayments, there's a more holistic challenge going on for most Australians around cost of living pressures with increase in energy prices, interest rate hikes, inflationary pressures. A lot of band-aids in there. Our supply issue's been on the radar for a long time. But yeah, it is a lot more on the focus of the governments now, and I think that is a good thing to try and help solve those problems.
All right, so plenty of politics being talked about on our Saturday morning, and we will talk again. This is kind of sneaked up on us on Tuesday. The RBA is going to have another one of their meetings, so we would expect that the interest rate would move downward. Anthony, until Tuesday, have yourself a fantastic weekend. Thanks for coming back on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Great to be here, and have a great weekend.
There are many differences. The Dubai property market has gone through a very transitional period in the last sort of 22 years, especially the high net worth investors who are attracted to the safety, to the ease of doing business here, to the weather, obviously. It can be a little bit brutal in the summer, but during the winter it's amazing like it is now.
So we talk about, the markets being different. I think, and we've mentioned this before, one of the key things about Dubai, without a doubt, is the level of speed that you've got to negotiate. Now, in Australia, people have got time, far more time, it would be said, than Dubai.
That's right, Craig, but I need to just clarify that we're talking about the off-plan market. When you're talking about the secondary market, there is time. I mean, we can be fast there as well, but you do have time to think and obviously get your finances in order.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.